Hi, folks. This is Jonathan Phoenix, the Carolina Storyteller, coming to you with an important message. Okay, this is an adult podcast, so it shouldn't be listened to by children. And if you're listening to this, I assume that you're an adult. And if you're not an adult, that's bad, because some of the things that we cover on this podcast are topics that really younger ages shouldn't be listening to. There's murder, there's death, there's blood, guts, and gore. Things that really they don't want to be exposed to. So as an adult, I'm going to ask you to keep the kids away. But I don't think every one of you is doing it. So I'm going to have to do something to curb this behavior if you don't stop. Maybe I'll tell your kids where Santa's real address is. Or maybe I'll tell them where babies come from. Or how to get a hold of the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. Or maybe I'll just tell them why the mailman always brings them birthday presents and why Daddy is really mad about it. So remember, keep the kids away from the adult material and enjoy the show. This is the Carolina Storyteller.
In the dark woods where shadows creep, stories rise as the campfire reaps. Jonathan's voice a haunting thrill, with every tale he bends on will. Echoes whisper, the night draws near. By the firelight, our fears collide. The Carolina Storyteller, our guide. Through the spooky, the fervent fight, fables of darkness igniting the night of the night. The ladder tales of fright and dread, every heartbeat a path we tread.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Carolina Storyteller. I'm your storyteller, Jonathan Phoenix. It is wonderful to have you here, and it is wonderful because this week again, well, actually not again for you guys, but if you were able to listen to Patreon, you probably have already heard the exclusive episode with tonight's guest. But if you haven't heard tonight's guest, allow me to introduce the Vampire Queen, Jacqueline.
Good evening, my dears. How is everybody?
I'm fine. I don't know about everybody who's listening, because now they have to deal with a vampire. But I'm doing quite well. And I have got a story for both you and for them.
Oh my, do tell.
Well, before we get into all that, there are some things I would definitely like to mention to the listeners. First of all, most importantly, I want to give a nod to the Nonsense and Deep Thoughts podcast, and Corey and Jared, Justin and Aaron, who had me on their podcast recently and who delivered our new theme, which you guys heard coming into the beginning of the show. That came from Jared on the NDT podcast there, and big thanks to those guys. And if you haven't listened to Nonsense and Deep Thoughts, you really need to listen to it. Those guys, it's a great bunch of guys, and they cover a whole plethora of things from paranormal to gaming to wrestling to just nonsense. And they have some deep thoughts, kind of in the name, but
Sounds like something I need to listen to.
you really should. It's a great podcast. And Corey's a great guy. If you don't know why I know Corey so well, that's because he's going to be voicing a Frigg Valmont in the upcoming Valmont, The Black Raven Chronicles, written and produced by me, assistant directed by none other than
Now, who would that be? It couldn't be anybody important, right?
you.
Come now, you can't really expect me to hype myself.
Yes, that's right. Vampire Queen. The Vampire Queen, Jacqueline, is assisting me in directing this project, and Corey from the NDT podcast is playing my lead character, and he was kind enough to have me on his show, and then he gave me a new theme to put on my show, so I have to give them a shout out. And I have to remind everybody that Valmont is coming out in December. On December 1st is when episode 1 drops, and you don't want to miss it. So be sure to look out for it. And in fact, if you go now, you can find Valmont by searching for it now. Just look up Valmont, and wherever you're listening to podcasts, there seems to be some unusual things happening that have been left there for the listeners to kind of get teasers going into the show in it. Of course, if you want behind the scenes features and all that great stuff and get all the extras, find out about the cast, all kinds of fun stuff, listen to the other episode with the Vampire Queen Jackie. You need to go to, where do they need to go, Jackie?
I believe they need to go to patreon.com/the Carolina Storyteller, isn't it?
That's absolutely correct. Patreon.com/the Carolina Storyteller. You can get to hear all of Jackie's interviews with the cast. You'll get exclusive episodes of the Carolina Storyteller. You'll get background stuff, all kinds of great stuff, just by going to patreon.com facebook.com/The Carolina Storyteller. And if you're interested in merch, go to thecarolinastoryteller.com, click on the store. We've got lots of great merch for you to get so you can be all stylish in your Carolina Storyteller love. On to today's story. We're in the middle of spooky season. As you know, I love spooky season. And I've got a great story for you guys tonight. And I wanted to tell the story of a plantation that was up near Jackie, Fairfield Plantation, but unfortunately I can't find all the stuff on it. And so I couldn't go with that plantation. And then I thought, you know what? I'll do some ghost lights.
Hey, ghost lights are always fun, as well as will-o'-the-wisps. And if you want me to, send me what you've got on Fairfield Plantation when you got a chance. I'll look up some stuff on my own. I'll actually make the episode for you, boss.
I'll see what I can do about getting that to you. But right now, tonight, because we can't do the plantation that was haunted by demons and that Ghost Nation went out to go find them because I couldn't find all the information and I wanted to have the information before I did the show, I'm going to do the ghost lights of the Low Country. Because just where I am, there are three ghost lights. So get ready for a trio of terrifying tales that will titillate you. That might not be the right word.
Definitely not.
Either way, they're going to be entertaining. We're going to start with the mildest of the ghost light stories, and that is the Somerville Ghost Light, known as Light Road. Now, the Somerville Ghost Light was seen and reported all the way up till around 2008, believe it or not. At that time, a lot of development started in the area where Light Road used to be, and it has now been built up, and now the interstate and roads run through there. And so even if the ghost light did appear, you probably couldn't tell because there's lights everywhere over there now. But the story goes that way back in the early 20th century, 1900s, for those of you that are keeping count, the railroad was coming into the town of Somerville. And there was a man who worked on the railroad. Each night as he worked on the overnight shift, his wife would come out with a lantern, and as he was coming through, she would bring him his supper. And so she would come out and she would hold up the lantern to signal him, and he would come through and he would get his supper. And this went on for many years as he worked there, moving the trains in and out in the area, until the night that there was a horrible accident. He ended up falling from the train as he was working and being ran over by the train and killed. Shortly after the accident, before his wife could be informed, she showed up to hold up the lantern with his dinner in hand. And it was his coworkers who went to her and explained to her that her husband had died on the track that night. Afterwards, this woman would come out every night with the lantern and kind of hold the lantern up, signaling to her husband. Even though he was already passed on, she still came every night to the rail yard. She was a figure there every night until she died. And then that's when the weird stuff started happening, because after she died, around the same time every night, a light could be seen along the tracks in the same spot where she would always come and bring her husband dinner. And it was said to have been sighted around the stroke of midnight. You could see a light making its way towards the tracks, and it would stay there for a few minutes and then fade away.
Love never dies, does it?
Apparently it does not. Supposedly she, up until they developed the area, came every night to see her husband. And, you know, when I moved to Berkeley County and I was first told this story, it was something that was still happening to this day. You know, they were like, yeah, you know, you can go out there right now and see it. You get out there in about 15 minutes, she'll be there. The thing is people who have seen the light have gone and tried to investigate it, tried to figure out what it was, tried to make some determination, and have never been able to identify what the source of the light is. It's a floating orb of light that appears, moves, and disappears all within the span of around 15 minutes. It occurs the same spot every night, around the same time every night. They tried to debunk it, they tried to figure it out, and no one was ever able to put anything down. Of course, the typical suggestions was that it was swamp gas reflecting the light from Venus off of Jupiter and back onto the moon.
You know, the typical stuff that makes a truck explode.
You know, but there was never any evidence to say what caused this mysterious light. And of course, it may still be that she shows up. We just really can't tell because her light was never very bright. Now there's so much light from all the traffic and everything else there that it could just be getting lost in the haze. But supposedly every night she would show up bringing dinner to her husband, who had long since passed on.
That's the kind of love we all hope for, is that even when we're passed on, our loved ones will still come visit us, bring us food, and especially after everyone has passed on, still meeting up at the railway every night.
Yeah, that's definitely the love that never ends, is the love that everybody wants. To think of that kind of dedication and love, it's really heartwarming and touching. And definitely not anything like the next story, which of course is on the other side of Monk's Corner. And this is the Cordsville Light. Now, the Cordsville Light is very different from the Somerville Light. The Cordsville Light, of course, also occurs on a railroad track. Now, don't ask me why they keep occurring on railroad tracks, but a lot of these lights do occur near railroad tracks. Now, is it because people had to signal with lanterns there? Don't know. But apparently there was a sawmill that was back there in the late 1800s, early 1900s off of the railroad spike in Cordsville. And this is as the Childsbury area was falling apart. And if you don't know about the Childsbury area, go back a few episodes and listen to the story on the little chick girl, because that was Childsbury, and this is in that same area. This is right near Strawberry Chapel. At the sawmill, the caretaker on the property was an angry old man. And apparently, teens, after the sawmill closed down, teens liked to go out there and kind of bug him, because he would come out with his lantern and his shotgun and yelling and screaming, but never really take a shot at him. So they'd show up on the sawmill, goofing around, causing problems. He'd come out shaking his shotgun with his lantern, yelling and screaming, and they'd run off. Now, I'm assuming the teens didn't know how bad in disrepair the sawmill was, but there was a reason it was closed down. They probably didn't know that a lot of the machinery still was technically active. It still had power. It could still work. I don't know why, but it did. And one particular night at this sawmill, they go out there and they're horsing around, and one of them accidentally activates one of the machines. And the old man comes out and he's yelling and screaming, and they're struggling to get away. And as he goes to come for them, he falls and ends up falling into the machine, where, of course, he loses his life and dies in this old sawmill. Now, the bones of this sawmill, some of them still stand to this day, but most of it's gone now. After his tragic death, nobody really went around the place a lot after that for about 30 or 40 years. But then it became a popular place again for teens to go, because nobody went around the place. So if you were going to go do something you didn't want to get caught doing, well, you'd go over to the old sawmill. And believe it or not, when I was a teen, we had places where it's like, nobody goes there. This is where we're going to go hang out and do the stuff that we're not supposed to do, because nobody's going to come out here.
I mean, same thing when I was a teen. A lot of times stuff like that would happen.
So they went out to the old sawmill, and this starts in the 1930s, is when the first reports happened, was that a group of teens went out to the old sawmill to partake in, I think they were drinking hooch. I think it was during Prohibition. I'm not 100% sure what was going on at the time, but they were doing something they shouldn't have been. When all of a sudden,
Oh no, not teens doing something they shouldn't have been.
all of a sudden they saw a light approaching. You know, they went to investigate when one of them was thrown viciously into one of the walls of the sawmill, and another one was dragged into the darkness before scrambling to get away. And then, of course, they all ran for their lives, some of them being scratched and even gouged on their backs and arms and legs, trying to get away from whatever it was. Of course, when you're a teen and you hear something like that, you do the smart thing and you never go back there, right? Wrong. It became a thing for teens to go out there. And as it turns out, that was not a very good thing, because for a good period of time, there were teens that ended up severely injured going out and trying to find the Cordsville Light. Supposedly, the old man became violent in the afterlife because he was tired of just chasing the teens away. He now intends to hurt the teens. And it was so far that, in fact, one teen in the 1970s was supposedly hospitalized from the wounds that he received from the old man, because he didn't get away fast enough, and his friends barely got him out of there. And supposedly, if you go down the spur on the railroad track where the mill used to be, and you get in the right place, you will see the light coming for you. And if you don't get away fast enough, he will get you and he will hurt you. And depending on how long it takes you to get away, he will hurt you bad.
I mean, I can't really say I blame him, though, considering how the teens treated him.
Yes. And as I said, this is a very mysterious but scary light. And generally, anyone who goes out there, they just know to run if they see the light. So since the late 70s, I don't think there's been an incident where someone has been injured out there, but many people have claimed to be chased off by the light and, of course, heard what they believed was someone yelling at them as they ran away. I'm not stupid enough to go out there, so I don't know.
I completely understand because you're not going to catch me out there.
For our last low country light, we need to make our way a little bit further north, just past Georgetown, out towards a place that I told the story of early on in season 1, Old Gun Church. Just past Old Gun Church is an old graveyard. Now, this graveyard dates back to before the Civil War, to the days of the plantations and, all the other old antebellum things that happened here in the South. And it is in this particular graveyard where, for a good period of time, it turned out that Confederate soldiers would receive messages from spies on the Union. Spies who were spying on the Union troops, they'd meet in this graveyard and they'd find a light. Well, apparently, at some point in time, the Union got wise to this whole thing, and it was a group supposedly it was the group that got wise to the spy were from the 54th of Massachusetts. And if you don't know about the 54th of Massachusetts, there is a movie called Glory. I recommend watching it. It's a great movie. It's about 3 hours long, though, just so you know. And it has Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman in it. There's another reason to watch it. It's a great movie. But supposedly they found the spy, murdered the spy, and then took the spy's place to draw in the Confederate counterpart.
Spymaster?
Yeah, who they then, of course, captured and killed. This led to them not being discovered as they made their way to the fort on Sullivan's Island, where they would have the massive battle that, as I was saying, we had some technical issues, folks, so bear with us. The Confederate spy gets caught by the 54th, and if you don't know who the 54th is, I recommend seeing the movie Glory. Looking into that, they end up killing the spy so that they can continue their march on to the fort on Sullivan's Island. And we're not going to talk about that. They replace the spy, they get the spy master, they kill the spy master, and they continue on. But apparently the spirit of the spy stayed there and has since used his light to draw others into the graveyard and then lead them off to the swamps along the PD River there, where they sink to their deaths and are never heard from again, because that's just what the dark and evil entity does when it sucks you into the swamp.
I mean, that's typical of Confederates.
Yeah, and that is our trio of terrifying tales. I hope that you all found them interesting. Actually, they weren't all terrifying. A couple of them were, but that's just the intro in spooky season. Jackie, anything to add about that?
Not really, other than the usual little thing that you can hear across cultures around the world. If you see a spooky light in the forest, don't walk towards it.
So never follow a light into a swamp, ladies and gentlemen. So 3 lights, the Somerville light, the Cordsville light, and the Plantersville light, all within 60 miles of me. One of them is actually really close to me. The other 2 are like 40 miles and 20 miles in one direction, 40 miles in another direction. Either way, not places I recommend hanging out or going to see for various reasons. First of all, with the Somerville light, if you go see it, you're going to be standing in the middle of the interstate. And it's not a good idea to be standing in traffic,
But it's fun to play in traffic. What's the worst that happens?
Actually, on that interstate, the worst that happened was a woman fell off of the overpass and was hit by a Mack truck.
Oh, that was grim.
Yeah, well, you wanted to know what the worst that could happen was, so I figured I'd share it with you.
I'd say that's pretty bad. I'd say that's pretty bad.
Yep. So remember, kids, don't play in traffic. Folks, that's our stories for tonight. I again want to thank my lovely guest, the Vampire Queen, Jackie.
And thank you for letting me be here.
I really appreciate having you here. It's really great to have somebody to talk to and to tell these stories to. We've got much more coming this spooky season. This is only, week 2 of the spooky season, I think, is what this one's going to be. Week 2, week 3. So we've still got many, many weeks to go.
Speak for yourself, darling, because let's be honest here. I always say spooky season starts on my birthday, August the 2nd.
Well, in my opinion, spooky season actually starts on November 1st. Well, no, actually, in my opinion, spooky season starts on January 1st. Because you have spooky season, then you have turkey season, then you have gift giving season, then you have the new year. The other seasons are much shorter, but they are equally important to me because there's food, food and gifts, food and drink. And then spooky season starts back over again. And spooky season begins in January and runs all the way until until November 1st. And it's very important that you understand that is spooky season. Okay. There's nothing else in between spooky season and turkey season. Okay. There's nothing that you have New Year's Day and then boom, spooky season. Okay.
No, I can agree there.
I don't like the argument that it's not, but this is the recognized spooky season starting in September 1st. It's the spooky season. And so we are now just a couple of weeks into the spooky season. This is our tale for this week. We've got plenty more coming. I may have more guests popping in with scary tales. You know, I've got a friend of mine that we talk about demons with. Could be bringing her by. We've got the whole Enfield haunt to talk about. Or I could get my leading expert on the Warrens, and we could get into a couple of those cases because I've still got the Devil Made Me Do It case that I haven't even touched yet. Many things to be going on. Jackie, any idea of a case that you might want me to take on?
I actually don't have any ideas about a case. I am not as well known on spooky stuff as my wives would be. I could always ask them about it, see if there's anything that they would recommend.
Well, you know, that's a great idea. In fact, whether you're one of Jackie's wives or you're just a listener that enjoys listening to me talk about stories and you have an idea for a story, hit me up. Go to thecarolinastoryteller.com. You can send me a message. I would be happy to review it and tell your story here on the show. And if you have a personal experience that you'd like me to share, again, hit me up. You can get me on Facebook. You can get me on Instagram. You can get me on X. You can go to thecarolinastoryteller.com. If you join the Patreon, you can get involved with the community chat over there, and we can cover your story, and I can tell it. I can change the names for you if you want, or I can tell everybody all about what happened to you. Be sure to hit us up. Jackie, anything else to add?
Only thing I've got to add is what I always say. Remember, darlings, don't let the vampires bite.
You heard it here first. I'm Jonathan Phoenix, the Carolina Storyteller. We'll see you next time. Stay spooky, my friends.